All right, everyone. Today we will talk about the best note-taking app out there available for our busy professionals. And this is also a follow-up on a video that I published on our YouTube channel about the best note-taking app 2025, in which I went through the history of note-taking, not only in regards of the note-taking apps, but if you haven't watched this, I think it's a really interesting video to watch, as it makes you realize the unfair advantage that you have using digital systems over paper systems. And well, we thought let's discuss this in our podcast too, as Paco has a lot to share about this too, as we are both on the same journey. So yeah, let's try to stay in the 30-minute time frame with this one, because there's so much to share, right?
Yes, correct. And well, in fact, our different ways merge thanks to note-taking and PKM and all this story. So it's a beautiful story, a romantic one too. So that's important to know, and how people get involved one to each other thanks to information. And that's what happened to the two of us. And to, well, at the end, it's... I think that all the relationships starts by exchanging information. So the better we handle, the better our relationships will be. And based on that is how you can grow and evolve and, well, and trying to make a reality of the projects that you have in mind. I think that it's important to first understand the different type of tools related to the world of note-taking, because I think that many people get confused, and I think that it's important use that as a starting point so that we can start discussing the topic that we have today. I always like to differentiate between note-taking tools, PKM tools, and tools for thought. I think that they are completely different. They are in the environment, in the area of information, but as always, there are a lot of nuances, and there are a lot of people who get confused because, first off, they don't know this classification of tools, but also software companies don't make any distinction, okay, when they try to sell their products. And I think that it's important because depending on how we want to use the information is how the tool that we choose should be. And starting with the first type, because this is not a matter of if one are better and others are worse. It's about understanding that there are different types of tools, and maybe you can use 3 different types depending on this classification, or not, or just use one. So going directly to the point, I would start saying that note-taking tools are the ones that you use to just create a note, okay? You create a digital note. We can discuss. I think it's not the moment, okay, discussing what a note is, okay, but let's understand that it's any kind of information that you want to store to later on retrieve, take advantage of it, or whatever, understanding that a note is not just text, it can have any type of content, okay? It can be a sound, a video, an image, and of course, a text, okay? So a piece of information, okay? So note-taking tools are used just to jot it down, to store, record it, and retrieve it later on. A classical example is Apple Notes, okay? It's a simple note-taking app where, well, you can connect and make links between one note and another, but the main purpose of the tool is jotting things down, okay, and then reference it later, okay, by making simple searches, okay. That has nothing to do with what we consider a PKM tool, that it's a personal knowledge management. This is where we start taking advantage of information by creating links, by seeing references, by creating connections, and those type of tools start emerging by simplifying how you can classify, okay, because mainly note-taking tools are based on folders, okay? Some of them have tags also, okay? And that's how PKM tools started when they went one step beyond, and Tom will explain it because he made an awesome video, okay, where we see this transition, okay? This is just to position ourselves and understand that there are 3 main type of tools that we need to be aware of, okay? And we can add an additional one, okay, with AI that we will talk later. So PKM is when you make a step further, okay, one step ahead, and you can start creating better connections, okay? For instance, backlinking, that it's that you go to a note and see all the references to that note, for instance. That's something that is not easy to do in a note taking, and in fact, impossible in some of them. You cannot see that in Apple Notes, for instance. And last but not least, I would like to mention tools for thought, because this is a classification, a type of tool that not so many people are aware, and they tend to be confused with PKM tools, okay? And a PKM tool is a tool that allows you to make that connection so you can take advantage of the information that you have previously stored. But tools for thought are tools that have been designed and developed on purpose to enhance how we think, okay? And that's totally different, okay? I can use a PKM tool to create connections in autopilot just by referencing one node or another inside any node, but a tool that has been developed trying to make us think better, it's a different type of tool, and we need to understand, okay? To use examples, I would say that a PKM tool could be Craft, for instance, or Evernote, okay? That goes one step beyond a simple note-taking app like Apple Notes, okay? But they haven't been designed to enhance how we think, okay? Or how we better understand complex concepts, okay? A classical example of tool for thought is heptabase, for instance. That's why it allows us to store information in different formats, okay? And I will stop my explanation here because, for instance, in heptabase, you can use visual thinking. You have the advantage of PKM tools with backlinking, using connections between different cards that are objects. By the team behind heptabase, they were trying to create, and in our opinion, they achieved this goal, that it's making us think better, okay? And I think that that creates a totally different approach to what note-taking and PKM tools are, because that way we can start demanding to each tool the goal for what they were designed initially. And I think that that's fair, okay, so that we can start comparing tools one to each other based on this classification that I think that is pretty clear and intuitive and helps you distinguish between, because I don't know, Thomas, how many tools talking about note-taking, PKM, and tool for thought. There are hundreds of them, so imagine going there without a little bit of a structure, at least with this simple classification that I think that for VC professionals is quite simple to understand, but also to use.
Yeah, beautiful explanation. And tools for thought is something I didn't even cover in this video. So it's a great, another perspective again to bring into this, or definition that we need to look into. And well, we talk here about what's the best note-taking app 2025. Spoiler alert, if you watch the video, right, you know that I concluded heptabase is the best note-taking app 2025 for me. Right? But based on the conclusions I go through the video, and that Paco here described too, he scratched a lot of different types of tools that all come together in heptabase. And that was my conclusion in this video. And that's something that I conclude again listening to you, Paco. If you are looking for the all-in-one solution when it comes to personal knowledge management / tools for thought, right? Then it is heptabase, in my opinion. However, be aware that it doesn't go deep into the individual categories of the different areas, right? There are specialized tools that do it better. And there we come in, for example, with Tana. And I mentioned in the video too, Paco, you are using Tana as your main PKM system and not heptabase. So is Tana now the best note-taking app? No. It is what it works best for your specific needs. And that's what we need. We are here to make you realize that there are different types of tools, and you need to realize what you actually need for your life and for your work, and then pick the tools according to this, and not based on recommendations that others give you, because it's impossible to recommend you the right tool out of the hundreds that we have out there without knowing what's going on in your life and what you actually need. And funny enough, one of the first comments I got below the video was, and who was the sponsor of this video, right? Pointing to that heptabase probably was the sponsor. No, we are proud to say that we are not sponsored. The only sponsors are our members, right? Our members, our paying members. this is how we can stay unbiased and actually give these recommendations. And I think many people who are sponsored by, I'm not saying any names, but PKM tools that are very popular, they have a hard time now seeing things like heptabase appearing and still trying to stay their ground and say, no, but the app I'm using is much better. And that's all based on the sponsorship that I have in the background. And that's why, well, that's so important. And we will keep this way, that we can give you these recommendations this way. So to me, heptabase is the best of all these different tools that we mentioned in the video and what Paco just laid out here. That is more than enough for what I needed right now. If I would need a specialized tool, or if I keep saying it whenever Tana comes up, if I would have a different volume in daily meetings and interactions with different people and working with a lot more people that I need to keep track of, Tana would be the way I would go to, because I need to much faster manage this information much quicker during the meeting and so on. But this is not a case for me. So heptabase and the journaling that I have in there is more than enough than I have, as I'm slow paced when it comes to this, but do a lot more deep thinking every day. So that's a big difference. So again, Paco, why don't you use heptabase as much as you do with Tana? On the other hand,
the fact is that for every type of tool that I have described, talking about this classification, I use different tools, okay? For note-taking, I use Raycast notes. I started with Apple Notes because they are different processes. We need to understand that it's not the same when you quickly jot things down than when you are in a meeting taking notes. That is not the same when I'm trying to figure out an article, when I try to edit an article so that I can publish. All those are, that's why we insist in processes and why we say that ICOR, the methodology that we have delivered, designed and created here at the Paperless Movement, is based on cognitive processes, okay? We need to understand how our brain works so that the process that we develop can perfectly fit the tool that we are using, okay? And for me, for instance, Raycast notes, it's something that I constantly using because there's one thing that affects my cognitive experience, okay? That is trying to write in a text box, okay? For me, that's something that creates a lot of friction. I have physical boundaries that limit how I think, and I want to have a big window, okay? No matter that I'm writing on WhatsApp in, well, thousands of different text boxes that we are interacting on a daily basis, at least in my case, and I create that content in that tool because this is like an intermediate tool, and in fact, it is an intermediate tool, okay? It's a tool that I use because it really works nice there. It allows, for instance, markdown so that I can create a quickly structure with bullets, with headers, with different bold or format options, okay? And I use it, and then I copy and paste. I express myself there with freedom, and then I copy and paste that content in the text box, okay? So for that use case and that mental process, for me, I need a specific note-taking tool, okay? That it's simple enough, that allows plain text, that allows me to copy and paste without, creating friction. And for that specific process, I use Raycast notes because I love it, okay? Instead of Apple Notes.
That you bring this up, as this is the typical example of temporary note-taking apps that I use too. I use Raycast notes as well, but to me, it's just a intermediate step, so I don't lose momentum on what I'm working on right now. And sometimes it's just noting down something, even that I have the clipboard history also in Raycast, but sometimes there's a recurring, I don't know, a recurring text I need to use many times at the same day, then it's there. Or, as you mentioned, drafting out something that I want to reply. It makes no sense to open up heptabase and go to a new node and think about, that's the friction in these tools, like especially heptabase, but also Notion and so on, where you have to think about, how do I create now this node, and how do there's always prompting you to create a title. That's something that gives me anxiety too. Sometimes I just want to jot things down, and that's what I'm using the tool for. And that's what we keep saying when people struggle I'm using Apple Notes, but I would like to use something more sophisticated. Yeah, then you may be realizing you cannot use either or. You need to use both. Maybe you're better in handwriting, so keep using Apple Notes and then convert the text later on and move it into the final destination. And there you have it. You have the lowest friction when it comes to capturing the information. And then you have a sophisticated PKM system behind where you enrich the information there. And sometimes it's even better because you have this intermediate step too, where you can think twice about what you have jotted down before and then refine it to actually bring in only clean data into your PKM system. And I just
Yes,
want
or to any AI tool to improve the text or giving you another perspective or whatever, or whatever. The point is having a place, as we don't use paper at all. It's nice to have that, old notebook in the digital version, okay, to really express yourself. Also, how you can perfectly have the size of paragraph, the width of the window, everything centered. Sometimes a floating window, that's something that is pretty useful because you are looking at some other place. For that, this simplicity that Raycast brings to the table, it's amazing in my opinion. I were aiming to use this tool because the beautiful thing is that it perfectly synchronizes with mobile, the mobile app of Raycast, okay? And that's great, okay? Because sometimes on the go, you can quickly jot things down. You can reference that note that that's something important, okay? That at any moment from any other place, you can link to that note so that you got a starting point. And if you want to create a task, for instance, you can perfectly describe there in Raycast notes instead of using the description field, in my case of Todoist, for instance, to capture something on the go, and I can copy the link and then create the task so that I will process it later. That flexibility, that speed, that fast capturing so that your brain have that sense of freedom. I think that it's important to really express the things that are going through your brain at that specific moment. And tools like that allows you to do that.
But then Raycast is your core application, right? If you really rely on it to use the fields instead of description fields inside your task manager.
For that use case, it is the main one because it's focused on the process of capturing information that later on I will process. In some other place, it could be information to create a proper task in our project management system, in our case, ClickUp. It can be something to generate, well, in the case of an idea for articles, no, because I use Tana in that use case, okay, because I send in directly to my content production funnel, okay, that is based on Tana, and there is where I express my ideas and I reference everything there. We are entering in the world of PKM and tool for thought. In my case, for my shallow thinking process, I use Tana, and even for a big part of my deep thinking process, I use Tana too, okay, because I feel comfortable with outliners. I've been using them for decades. I was using workflow with since the beginning, okay. For me, it was amazing discovering that someone had been able to implement the outlining technique in such a simple way, so simple that for most of the people, were complicating and they didn't understand why it was so useful. But there are people whose brain perfectly fits with the outlining technique and they don't get lost. And this tool, that it's a tool for thought because it's a technique that was designed, I think, in the 18th century to develop your ideas, okay? To bring that structure to really express correctly random thoughts that go through your mind. And I think that the moment that we find a digital tool that accelerates that, okay, because it's much faster in the case that you are used to this type of tools, okay, to write things down using a keyboard. You can create the structure, you can move things up and down, you can go into focus mode whenever you are into a specific node. All those features that I'm mentioning belongs to the world of outliners, okay? And you cannot ask, I don't know, Evernote to deliver the exact same experience because it has nothing to do, okay? The backbone of every single tool has been designed thought and developed with a purpose on mind. And these are incompatible, okay? Things, features, services, how they structure the backend, the database model, how they code everything, okay? Oh, the graphical user interface, everything is really complex and different. And that's why I consider that it's not fair when people start comparing tools that have nothing to do one to each other. And that's why it's so difficult to find a tool for everything, okay? Because we are trying, it's like finding a car for everything, okay? To transport 8 people, but at the same time to have a lot of acceleration and be like a sport car, then you cannot, people understand that in some other topics, but relating to note-taking, PKN, information technology, they don't understand these crucial differences because nobody explained them correctly, and based on that, they go directly to a market that is huge of solution, of services, and then it's really difficult to find the perfect fit because many times it doesn't exist, okay, just one fit. And here we are expressing our use case, okay, that in our case, we are using Raycast nodes for specific use cases and for some others. In the case of Tom, he's using mainly heptabase, but in my case, I'm using mainly Tana. And that doesn't mean that in my case, I'm not using heptabase because I'm also using heptabase for some other use cases because the moment that I want to really express myself and I want to move away of the world of outlining, okay, and I need to express to have, plain text and long text format, I need to find something, okay? And for my articles, I use another tool. I'm not going to mention it, okay, so that I don't complicate the things. But for many other things, I use heptabase. But I connect everything, and that's the thing. I have a clear why I'm using each tool. I have no doubt where I'm creating each piece of content so that the moment that I want to retrieve, to take advantage, to leverage all that information, I can do it with purpose, okay? Because it's the why, and that's why we emphasize in concepts and workflows, methodology, clarity, okay? To start using the different tools. Because if not, if you don't know the why behind a tool, and I think that that's a common mistake, okay? Just betting on a template using a tool that maybe you don't even know because you saw the implementation, how that person was using it, you don't have a deep why, okay? You don't know why things happen, why things are structured that way. Maybe that's not how you think and how your brain works. And then you start trying to emulate, okay, to copy and paste how others are processing information. That's not the case, okay? We think that it's easier, much easier to better understand how your brain works and then trying to make the process of choosing the tool something that you really understand. And when you have a deep why behind a tool, it's really difficult to fail. And I think that that's the moment that friction disappears. The digital wall is not an obstacle in your life, and you just let yourself go. That I think that that's the most important thing. Okay, you need to let yourself go and interact naturally, okay? The same way that you act with your brain, your hand, your body, everything, you need to interact the exact same way with digital tools because that's the moment that you really use those tools to enhance how you work, how you think, how you feel, all the things that we try to deliver by using ICOR.
Yeah, absolutely. So the key message is really here, you need to understand first that there are different types of information that you collect every day and that you process every day and receive every day. And understanding these different types will help you to then define the single source of truth for this type of information. What Paco mentioned, he uses Tana and he uses heptabase for certain use cases, and he perfectly knows where what type of information goes, and more importantly, where to retrieve it later on. That's a difference to people using both tools and having scattered information. And Mary also shows in the chat, she shared, I've ended up doing almost all of my note-taking in heptabase now, not because I did a sophisticated analysis of tools, but mostly by default, since it ended up being the most frictionless path to marry my note-taking with knowledge management. Yeah, and that's the most pragmatic way, and that's why we keep recommending this to our and Paco too, right? You recommend first heptabase before you would say go for Tana, because for most use cases it's the easiest learning curve inside heptabase, and it goes a long way before you hit a ceiling and you need something else, and that's really key. But once you realize there's a specific type of workflow and information flow that you handle every day, and heptabase gives you friction every day, that's the moment you seek then out things like Tana and other tools that might enhance this workflow much better. And that's really important to understand. And what we also need to understand, and there's just no other way around, people have to invest time in order to get to this point, like Mary, to have this insight. Mary is with us for years and she gets still these conclusions over time. You cannot just make a hack and watch one YouTube video and then you suddenly have everything else. You just have to realize all these quick pushes that you do going on YouTube and see how somebody implements, and you do this in summary, you invest a lot more time, you waste a lot more time, and you add more friction to your system as it is not comprehensively thought through from start to finish. And that's what we help you at the Paperless Movement with the ICOR methodology, where we are not only looking into PKM and how to take better notes, but how everything is connected that goes beyond information into action. And that's something that is usually missing in other methodologies, and that's where it clicks for most people, that there are types of information they shouldn't go in any note-taking app at all. They should just end up on the task itself for everybody to see, so we are more efficient. But that could be a whole other episode. I think for today we made a good deep dive into the world of PKM and note-taking. Thanks very much, Paco, for sharing your insights too. And also for Mary inside the chat and the others participating in this live call. And I cannot wait to catch up next week with another topic around this. Everybody, we catch you up next week then.
Okay, see you guys. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.